Okay, cool. You ready, Peter?
No, ready. As ready as I could be.
Podcast episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one we're looking at The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Yeah, it's been a really good book, I think, to just try and think more about money and psychology and people dealing with money and all that kind of stuff. So
I should say, and I think I shared with you last week, or that was on Monday, that this is the most challenging book I've read.
yeah, because you said it was like sort of dealing with money and things in general. It's just a weird topic.
Yeah, weird topic for me. But I think the end. I needed to get to the end because it spoke about, if you shy away from certain topics, you end up being in a bubble and not exposed to different things, and then you don't make the right decisions about it. So I think after reading that, I think I need to rethink my approach to certain things. So yeah.
I think like with most things in life, there's a balance where it's good to be exposed, but you can also be obsessed with a thing. And so I think and that's also partly why I really like this book. It's because it's not like super technical money focused.
Yes.
It's more just about humans interacting with money and how do you do that reasonably. And he has some decent financial advice as well, but that's not the primary focus of the book.
It's practical stories, relating to people around financial decisions. And you need a bunch of set of data and information to kind of make a concise decision. So I guess he provided the data, and then it's up to us to do as we wish with it,
Exactly. Okay, do you want to give a book summary, or do you want me to try and give one?
Go for it.
Cool. Okay, so as the title suggests, the book's about the psychology of money, and as the subtitle suggests, it's going through timeless lessons on wealth and greed and happiness. And the book looks at how different people think about money, how they feel about money, how they spend it or don't, and the idea of status and money, greed, the rational and irrational things that people do with and for money, and much more related to, of course, the psychology of money. But mostly, it's about how we behave in relation to money. So he says on page 2 that the premise of the book is doing well with money. The premise of this book is that doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. And the author goes on to say that financial success is not a hard science, but it's a soft skill where you have to behave, where how you behave is more important than what you know. And then the soft skill is, again, what he calls the psychology of money. And so in 20 chapters, based on an original report that he wrote of the same title, The Psychology of Money, the book gives a series of short stories and examples in which the author is trying to convince you that soft skills are more important than the technical side when it comes to money. So yeah, that's, I think, what the book's about.
I should say it's important, that last bit, that it's about soft skills. And I think that's so true in every industry or line of work that you're in. You can have the technical ability to do things. That's all good and well, but you also need that ability, that soft skill ability, how to articulate yourself better, how to, just to be real and say, this is the reality of things. Technically, we can do that, but the reality is that can't happen because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people lack that. Yeah, and we'll probably chat about it further down, but I'm just in a situation where people are not making room for error. And that's something that even financially needs to be considered. And again, it is a soft skill. There's no technicality about room for error. Right? You have to think about it and say, okay, I need to account for this.
Yeah, and there is, of course, the technical aspect to it, but it's generally the bigger problem is that we don't have the soft skill. We don't have that like way of thinking about. So when we plan for things like with the room for error thing, we think everything's going to go according to plan. But as he says in the book, plan for things not to go according to plan. That's the main plan. Yeah, no, there's lots of good examples of that, where people just, they don't approach things in the right way, and then they fail because they expect things to be a certain way, or they're too greedy, or they didn't plan for the failures and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Cool. Also, last little point on that intro, which I think is really helpful. It's saying a very similar thing, but that behavior is difficult to teach. I think that was a really good point made in the book, and it's super obvious, like with most things in life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's very helpful to just be like, okay, you can show someone a bunch of different things, and you can show them the formulas, and you can say that compounding is a great thing, but at the end of the day, those behaviors that people have in place in their life often are the bigger cause of either issues or possibly even successes. So that behavior idea is quite a good one. Cool. Okay, should we dig into some key takeaways?
We can dig into some key takeaway. You can list your topics and then add on to what you say, and then possibly
check in some more.
Yeah, check in some more.
Cool. Yeah, okay, so the way that I did the takeaways for this one was just looking at my favorite chapters and kind of taking pieces of them.
Because similar thing. Okay.
Yeah, because there's, if people are interested in reading the book or even just the article, because the article apparently covers similar topics. I haven't actually read the article. I glanced at one or two little parts of it. But pretty much all the chapters are very helpful. I don't think that there was one chapter where I was like, oh, well, that was not necessary to include. So well done, Morgan. And yeah, so those summaries or the key takeaways that I put is basically just looking at some of my favorite chapters, but most of them are really, really great. Yeah. Okay, so the first one is the chapter on never enough, when rich people do crazy things. I love that subtitle. Yeah, it's just rich people can do crazy things. There's obviously people that are very good with money, but it's also surprising to see just how distorted one's view of money gets when you get more of it.
Yeah.
And it's all comes back to those lifestyle things and a bunch of things that I'll touch on now. But yeah, it's just weird.
No, I would say, I think it's purely greed. Because, there was that, the story that he speaks about with the Gupta guy who was already, rich, had, to me, lots of money, but still wanted more. And, that greed pushed him to do some unethical things.
Yeah.
And then ended up losing everything, But even after being arrested and being released, when asked what he learned, he felt like he did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
It's
strange.
So yeah, I think with that never enough, the one thing that, and I think it was mentioned in the summary, is knowing when the goalpost stops. I think that is a very important point, and I think that's true to everyone. And I think personally, I would say, and I always tell my friends or people that I know whenever they start going on about money or that I need more money, I'm like, you always need more money. You have to make that decision to say, this is what, in this period of my life, I'm happy with. Doesn't mean you don't need more than that. Everyone would love more money. But if you have that line, whatever you get over that goalpost, good for you. But everything else you can manage better. You see, so, and I also think people throw out goals out there when they're not actually ready to deal with the repercussions for it. Because it's so well and to have more money, but then that changes what the decisions you make.
Yeah.
Like you said, the guy already had more money, but wanted more money. Why? Because he was exposed to what more money can do.
Yeah. You buy the 42-inch TV, and now you want the 80-inch TV.
You know,
And the 40-inch TV seems so small now,
you
but
know,
meantime, it's actually fine.
yeah,
We just, those goalposts shift.
you know.
Yeah.
So you need that discipline to just put your foot down and be like, this is it. But I mean, easier said than done, I guess.
As always. Soft skills.
Yeah.
So there's a story from page 37 which I like quite a bit. I'll read it quickly. Let me just quickly turn there. So it's about touching on these same topics. So John Bogle, the Vanguard founder who passed away in 2019, once told a story about money that highlights something we don't think about enough. So the story goes, at a party given by a billionaire on Shelter Island, Kurt Vonnegut informs his pal Joseph Heller that their host, a hedge fund manager, had made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his wildly popular novel Catch-22 over its whole history. But Heller responds, yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough. And yeah, I just thought that's like, it's again a super simple story, but to really internalize that and be like, and there's people that really don't have enough and do need more, but for at least I would say the vast majority of the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, we're in a fortunate situation where we probably do have enough, even though we don't feel like it. And to realize that enough is enough, and you don't need a mansion with 5 elevators and 20,000 rooms, and
Yeah, rooms that you probably move in and move out without actually ever sleeping in.
Yeah. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like like you said, if you internalize that and really think about it, I think it takes some level of maturity to get to the point to be like, no, this is it. This is enough for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what everyone struggles with, knowing what enough looks like to them.
Yeah. Sort of going back to that Gupta story that you had. So if I would imagine Warren Buffett looking at Mr. Gupta and saying, so, because there's a quote in the book that goes like this. It says, to make money they didn't need, to make money that they didn't have and didn't need, they risked what they did have and did need. And that's foolish, just plain foolish. So I think it ties back to that, like where realizing where you have enough and not trying to get, like you were saying earlier, greedy people often just, they have this insatiable greed. I think they tie well together.
Yeah, no, I know probably we'll speak about this later down the line or something, but I think that principle is, I think, something that people really need to think about because, for instance, let's say you get an X amount of money. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, 10,000 rand, right? And I know in today's day, I can't say 5,000 rand is then considered enough for you. That's 5,000 rand more that you can do with other things. And in that regard, I don't mean even like splurging on stuff and whatnot, but as Morgan says, you need to save almost everything you get and don't save it for a goal. That's like you putting away half of the money that you earn.
Yeah.
but it's that ability to be like, this is all I need. Because, you know, we all get decent amount of money, but at the same time, it's like the more you get, the more you're like, oh, I can scale up. I can live in this house now. I can
Yeah.
live in this neighborhood now. Oh, I can drive a bigger car. All these
Mm,
things that aren't really supposed to be the case, because you can drive a small car, probably get you to ANC. You might argue that it's not as safe, but it'll probably do that, and you're paying for way less than you are
mm,
for a luxury car.
yeah.
You know, um, yeah, it's just funny how life works that way. The more you have access to, the more you want to spend.
Yeah, it's the whole
You know,
billionaire buying yachts thing where it's like, for us, it's like, what, why would you
why?
even want a yacht?
You know,
But then when you get there, then everyone around you
you has
has
one.
yachts. So you're like, this is the thing. And then you get this desperate, I mean, going back to the greed thing, you get this desperate, greedy desire. And you're like, I want a
I
yacht.
want a yacht.
Yeah. So there's a few points that he also makes in this book. So it's about, if assuming that you earn enough to cover your sort of base expenses and you have some change to splurge, and splurging would be anything from sort of buying a new phone when your current phone is working fine, but maybe the camera isn't as good as you want it to be, or any of those kind of things. And so he says, if that's the case, then remember a few things, and these are the few things that he says. So the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. So that's that thing you mentioned earlier, and 100% agree. It's if you can get that right, a lot of the issues with money sort of go away, because you don't keep buying these unnecessary things, or feeling like you need more. I don't think I'll touch on it, so maybe I'll just touch on it now quick. There's a story where he talks about investors, and there's some investors that they're working 80-hour work weeks to make an extra small fraction of a percent, where he says that there's sort of a couple percent in just lifestyle that they could easily forfeit, but instead they decide to work crazy hours because they don't want to forfeit that I would say almost unnecessary lifestyle. So yeah, that's the one thing, getting the goalpost to stop moving. And the other one we touched on now as well is that social comparison is the problem here. So he says that the point is that the ceiling of social comparison is so high that virtually no one will ever hit it. So coincidentally, that yacht analogy ties in well. And then another one is that enough is not too little. So enough is realizing that the opposite, that insatiable desire or appetite for more, will push you to the point of regret. So that's something else that he says there. And then a last point that he makes in this list of things to remember is that there are many things that are never worth risking, no matter what the potential gain. So some of the examples that he gives were, I think, reputation and things like that, because, and I at the time I thought, oh, it's a little bit of a weird one, because, reputation isn't that important. It's a little bit egotistical to sort of be like reputation is important. And then I thought about it more, and he spoke a little bit more about it, I think, at different points. But your reputation does have a lot of things tied to it, and your social standing in a group of sort of family and friends and things like that. Having a good reputation isn't actually a bad thing. It's a good thing. And you can obviously sort of be too egotistical and driven by that, and that would be the bad side of it. But just to sort of desire to have, I guess, in some sense, good social standing is, in a strange way, and previously wouldn't have said this. I would have been too almost reserved to say this. Is that it is a good thing. It's not, as long as you don't sort of let it get to your head and go the ego route, then I think it is a good thing to aim for that. And if you are risking that reputation by doing bad things, whether it's sort of fraudulent things or even risking your family's investment savings on a gamble because you think it might make you a massive turnover, those are things that just aren't worth risking.
Actually, so on that point, I have a different view from the underlying thing is the same, but just to pedal back, he kind of tied reputation with being egotistical, stuff like that. I beg to differ, and I'll tell you why. Reputation is birthed from mostly good, right? And I do not think that, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're being humble, generous, and that, I don't think that in most cases will lead to you being egotistical.
Yeah, I think he even makes that point in the book. So he has that example of where he's telling he writes a little blurb to his kid. I think he writes a letter, and this is like a little piece from that letter where he says to the kid effectively along the lines of, if you think that having a nice car and being super wealthy and all of these different things, I don't know if he says the wealthy thing, he definitely says the car thing. If you think that that's what you want, you're wrong. What you want is respect. And in order to get respect, you driving the fancy car is not going to get you that. What will get you that is kindness, humility. But I agree with you, and I think Morgan agrees.
Yeah. So that's just my take on that. And there is actually a section in the Bible, funny enough, a few weeks ago, the youth were looking at that, but it does talk about how, it takes a while to build a reputation, but quickly you can ruin that so quickly, which is a shame. You can work your entire life to making a good name for yourself, and you do one thing wrong, and like people forget all the good that you've ever done. And I think that's the sad reality we live with. And I think in another section of the book, in a different context, was about even when you invest in the small little wins, almost to go by unnoticed, no one says anything about it. The 1% increase in the market a day, no one will scream on the rooftop that the market has gone up 1%. But a 1% decline, then everyone's on the roof that the market is going array. So unfortunately, the good doesn't receive the spotlight it deserves as opposed to the bad.
Yeah, that whole chapter that we were speaking about just before we started with the pessimism. People love pessimism. There's a great quote. I don't think I'll be able to find it now quickly.
Seduction of pessimism.
Yeah, that's the chapter name. Yeah, but there's a great quote that a historian writes. I'll just paraphrase it, where he's like, he or she has just never understood the allure of pessimism. Like, people just seemingly want things to go badly, and there's a lot of things that are going badly in the world, but we often don't look at the good parts and stuff. And I guess it, in some weird psychological sense, it ties back to that desire for more. We think that when we're in a decent situation, we think that this isn't good enough. There must be more.
There must be more.
And then you either want to go travel or you want to do this or that. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But it's just when that sort of, I guess, underlying sort of greed kicks in, then it becomes a
I mean,
problem.
in that chapter, sorry, just to add, it talks about how if you look up at the technology advancement or the medical advancement that has happened in the last 50 years, you know, it's like, and like, I mean, I think, I don't know what the exact wording of it, but in the 1900s, tech was never thought to be something people would invest in, you know. But if you look at 100 years later, the market is filled with tech companies, like on the stock exchange. But when the smallest bad thing happens, people don't appreciate what has been accomplished in the last 50 to 100 years, but just focus deeply on the things going wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying don't do that, but also I think learn to be like, okay, we're doing all right. But I guess maybe people become a lot more complacent if they're in that bubble that everything is all right and we're doing well and stuff. So maybe that pessimism, as that chapter says, is just needed to give people that extra edge, that extra motivation. I mean, it's sad that that's the reality of it and that's how we live, but I think we need to appreciate the good around us.
Yeah, it makes me want to read that book, Factfulness, by, I can't remember what his name is, Hans something, where he, and I think he even quotes it in the book here, where he just does all these different studies and he has a bunch of data that shows how things have been improving over time, and yet people sort of don't look at that. They just look at the bad headline of, I don't know, someone, something bad happening to someone.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to the next one. So that was never enough, and
Never
people
enough.
just never having enough or feeling like they never have enough.
Like we all do.
Yeah. So the next one I had was Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. And the subtitle there is Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. Yeah, another good one. And it just, with the very minimal financial knowledge that I have, I think it's definitely a good point to make, where people think that it's all about being this incredible investor and stuff, but the main thing is just staying in the game.
Yeah.
If you can stay in the game and you do it consistently, then you'll be a lot better off. I'll touch on a few things and then we can chat about it. So I've got your building wealth and preserving wealth require different mindsets and strategies, or as he puts it, getting money is one thing and keeping it another. Then he goes on to say, if I had to summarize money success in a single word, it would be survival. So I want to quickly look at, there's a nice story, or I don't know if nice is the word, but there's a story about this guy, Jesse Livermore, he was a wildly successful financial investor. So it's on page 57, where it says here, Jesse Livermore was one of the greatest stock market traders of his day. And by the age of 30, he was worth an inflation-adjusted equivalent of $100 million, which is just absolutely nuts. Then by 1929, Jesse Livermore was already one of the most well-known investors in the world. The stock market crash that year ushered in the Great Depression, and that is what cemented his legacy. So what happened there is that more than a third of the stock market's value was wiped out in October 1929. And at that time, there was sort of obviously panic and worry. And so I think Morgan's pulling from some biography that was written, and the picture that's painted is of Livermore's wife, who is, I don't know, say at home or something, and she's worried about Livermore because Livermore is now, he's obviously a massive player in the markets, and there's been this huge crash, and I'm assuming things on TV are crazy, and people are all worried. Well, I don't even know if they had TV back then, but maybe black and white TV. And so there's all this panic, and then according to the biographer, when Jesse gets back, so he basically stood confused for a few moments and being like, what on earth has just happened? And then he broke that news to his family. And what happened is, in a stroke of genius and luck, combination of both of those things, he had been short on the market, betting that the stocks would decline. And so then his wife says to him, "You mean we're not ruined?" And he says, "No, darling, I've just had the best day of trading ever. We're fabulously rich, and we can now do whatever we like," which is quite wild. He's this well-known, famous investor by the time that Great Depression, that crash comes. And then he happens at that stage to bet against it, stroke of genius and luck, and it goes down. And then because it goes down and he bet against it, he makes a ton of money. So that's really great and all. But here's the thing. He goes on to say, fast forward a few years, I think it's about 4 years, and the stories cross paths again. After his 1929 blowout success, Livermore, overflowing with confidence, made larger and larger bets. He wound up far over his head in increased amounts of debt and eventually lost everything in the stock market. Now, I don't know how he did sort of towards the end of his life. I can't remember if they touch on it there.
I
But
think he might have committed suicide or something.
yeah, it's quite likely, yeah. But the point is that, again, getting money is one thing, keeping money is another. Yeah. So the last two little sort of points there are that he says growth, it's not growth, nor it's brains, nor insight, but the ability to stick around for a long time without wiping out or being forced to give up. That's what makes the biggest difference. This should be the cornerstone of your strategy, whether it's investing or in your career or in your own business. And then lastly, for this chapter, there's the idea of room for error, and we've touched on this a little bit before, which is what helps keep one resilient. So he says here, many bets fail not because they were wrong, but because they were mostly right in a situation that required things to be exactly right. Room for error, often called margin of safety, is one of the most underappreciated forces in finance. So yeah, those are the sort of main highlights for me from that chapter. And I guess it touches on a bunch of different things that we've looked at.
Yeah. I mean, I made a note here. It says, but keeping money requires the opposite of taking risk. It requires humility and fear that what you've made can be taken away. I think that's something that people take lightly. You know, it's like, I've made all this money, but they just never understand that you can have it today and then tomorrow all of it is gone just because of a decision that you probably didn't make yesterday, made years back, and it's just coming back to bite you. So that was one thing I highlighted. And I think there were just the points towards the end about what you need to apply to have a survival mindset, in the sense that get wealthy and staying there, it says the first point says, more than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable. And if I'm unbreakable, I actually think I'll get the biggest returns because I'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
a great one.
and I mean, I think we skipped that chapter as one of them, but there was a chapter before this that talks about confounding compound.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
I love that phrase. Yeah.
so I think we over. I mean, I'm bad myself. I mean, I think for years and years I've been told about how important it is to start saving young and all that kind of stuff. I'm not there yet.
We'll
And
get you there, Peter.
the time's taken, but yeah, that compounding works wonders, and I think that's just highlighted here that even if you make tons of money, you need to put some away, allow that money to work for itself. And then the second point talks about planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to plan. That's that room for error,
Yeah.
and I think most of us are not good at doing that. We think we're in this perfect world that, you know, won't go the other side. You pin it down to the T, but that's not how life works. And I think that has to do with finances. And I think Morgan does talk about how people don't plan for emergencies. You can have your years mapped up, and then you get medical condition down the line that requires you to drain all your savings, unfortunately, but that's not something you'd have planned for. So yeah, that margin of error is very important. Put away money for the sake of putting it away. You never know what you might need it for, and I think that's something that I've taken away from this book to say, just save money.
Yeah.
Like
You don't need a specific
you don't
thing.
need
Yeah.
a specific thing, and I think I was good at that during lockdown. And I think it's also because there was nothing to spend it on, but I was putting away money just for the sake of putting money away. And I think finally I'm back there. I'm back to putting money. I might have not goals, but say if I do put away money, I might be able to do this. It's not that it's guaranteed that I'll do that, but I might as well put away money.
Gives you those options.
Yeah, and I mean it goes back to one of the chapters talking about freedom. There's just some level of freedom you get if you manage your money well and you have that cushion somewhere.
Yeah.
And then the third and last point, I'll just read the middle part. It says, optimistic about the future, but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future. I think that's, a barrow personality, it says, is very vital. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's... We obviously want to cower away from that being paranoid about things, but I think if there are things that you want to be paranoid about, I think the idea of sort of being wiped out financially is one of the ones that's probably more healthy. It's probably not also super healthy, but I guess the general idea is just being very aware of the fact that things can wipe you out financially, and if they do, it can be quite devastating. And it's not that you can't ever recover from it or things like that, but ideally, and it's part of the reason why people like Warren Buffett and them are so wealthy, is because they have consistently gone through, I think it's something in the book mentioned, either like 12 or 14 recessions Warren Buffett has held through all of those recessions. And to be able to do that, you have to be mentally extremely strong and also have that room for failure. And if you do have that, then most likely you have some level of sort of, not necessarily worry, but you're very aware of the fact that there are massive dips at times, and you need to be able to withstand those dips in life in general and in finance. And if you can withstand them consistently for a long time and keep on investing, again, with finance or with skills or with whatever it might be, doing that will pay extremely large rewards in the long run, but you have to be able to withstand those tail events, good or bad. Cool.
Okay.
Should we go on to the next chapter?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next chapter was his final chapter. So that chapter is Confessions, and it's the psychology of.
So can I stop you there?
No, go for it.
Let's get the Confessions after, then I add a few chapters because that's your 3.
Cool. I'm ready.
I don't be as deep as yours was, but I'll just highlight. I struggled to pick, but Never Enough was one. So we've already discussed that. So my next one was actually Freedom, and I did briefly speak about it now. And yeah, he talks about how there's just when you have, again, I'll go back to, if you have made the provision to have that cushion for you, you have the freedom to make certain decisions because you know you're going to be all right. For instance, I will add a lot of different examples, some in the book, some not really discussed in the book, but it talks about how his father, but I think this is in the Confessions chapter or the one before that, how he lived from being poor to getting by, and I think he became a doctor late in life and supported. But there was a time where, because I think it was like emergency room doctor or something.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, with most doctors, you work super long hours.
Yeah, and it was a very high stress environment. But he was able to get to a point to be like, I'm done, you know? And I think that's the level of freedom that we need to be like, if, for instance, if you're unhappy at your job, be able to say, I'm done, you know, because as much as you need the job, you have enough put away to sustain your lifestyle, you know, for X amount of months while you look for a different job. And I think that's what I think us young people at the moment are struggling with, because we treat jobs as this is it, you know, I have to be in a job. You know?
Yeah.
But we need to learn to be able to start saving up, I would even say like 2-3 times your salary put away, that if you ever want to get away of a sticky situation, be like, okay, I'm done, you know. And I'm sure it's a worrying situation, but at least you know you'll be comfortable for X number of months before you're really desperate to get a job. And I think money just affords you that freedom, you know. And I think it's really, really important, you know, for people to, have that. I don't know if you have anything.
No, I definitely agree with it. Part of the sort of Confessions part that I go through is actually touches a lot on that. Because it's a great thing to have that freedom, and if you are fortunate enough to be able to have enough money that you can put aside a bit, and again, I think Morgan would argue, I think I would argue that most people, probably people that would listen to this, people that we would interact with, most of those kinds of people probably do have enough money to put away and to save up that 3, 6, 12 months of of expenses. But we often don't think we do. But if we were to get there, then it gives that a massive amount of freedom. And I think he touches on in the book as well, where that kind of freedom is one of the key drivers of happiness as well, because I guess you don't feel that isolation of like, okay, I have to do this thing. This is it. Because I need to be able to pay the next bill at the end of the month. And if I don't, then yeah. And I mean, we're in a situation where we don't have kids yet.
Yeah.
If you have kids and stuff, that feeling is probably even worse
Yes,
because you
have
really can't.
dependence.
Yeah. Um,
I just want to read the opening section of this chapter. It actually says, the highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different. But if there's a common denominator in happiness, a universal feel of joy, it's that people want to control their lives. The ability to do what they want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It's the highest dividend money pays. So I think I read that and I was like, okay, that's a chapter. And I agree 100%. I think I'm in that stage in my life that, like, I want to do what I want when I want. Wake up today and be like, okay, this is what I want to do, and know that I'll be able to do it.
yeah.
Not having to jump through hoops, having to ask people, and yeah.
Yeah. If we're able to get there, it's a really great
Feeling.
place to be.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that. And then this one's going to be short, but it's Man in the Car paradox. And the reason I picked that, and like I said, it's going to be a quick one. It's about when you see a fancy car, you're looking at the car, not who's driving it. And that's a very striking reality that, so often you see fancy cars on the road, maybe only now there are those clips on social media where you see people asking, oh, so what do you do for a living? But an ordinary Jack and Jill will say, nice car and just be like, I want to drive that. But you don't know how that person got that car. He might be in debt.
Yeah.
Or he might have paid it off cash. People don't stop to consider that. You aspire to drive one of them, but you don't know what it takes to actually drive one of them. You might know, but you just don't know what you have to put yourself through to be in that seat, that driver's seat.
And it ties back to that reputation thing where that, I think Morgan said to his kid, where you just, that's not what things are about. Life isn't about that. It's more about that humility and kindness and all of that. But then it also ties back nicely to that chapter on wealth is what you didn't see or what you don't see. Because we often think we see these people with nice houses and nice cars, but often that means more that they're in debt. They owe a massive amount of money to the bank rather than that they have a massive amount of money. Even though on the surface it looks like they do. And in some sense that's fine, but the dangerous part is if something happens that wipes them out. So a dip in the market or something like that wipes them out. Now it's really difficult because now you've set your lifestyle bar extremely high and you have no money because things have wiped you out and you owe a lot of money. And if you're in that kind of situation and you lose your job or a bunch of different things go wrong, then it's a really, really dangerous situation to be in, which is going back to that getting the goalpost to stop moving.
So I think that's the added two that I have. I think the last one, I think we've spoken about at length, but it's that room for error. So
worth speaking about at length.
I think as human beings in general, we just need to plan that, something might go wrong. People don't like
plan on the
that.
plan, not going according to plan.
But I think that needs to be even with our finances, know that yes, that might be your budget, but something might break in the course of that month that you did not expect. And just you should be ready for it. Yeah. It talks about if there's one way to guard against their damage, it's avoiding single point of errors. Make sure that your stuff is not dependent on one thing, your finances are not dependent on one thing. I probably can say how if you can have multiple streams of income, something I haven't gotten right, but that's one thing that maybe one can consider. It goes on to say a good rule of thumb for a lot of things in life is that everything that can break will eventually break.
Yeah.
And like I said, you need to budget for that. It might be, I know this is what, like in a month your laptop packs up. And think about us, we software developers, and likely we get that provided to us. We're not freelancers, but imagine you're freelance and your one source of income packs up and you didn't save up for it. Like to say that this might happen. You will live in under the assumption that you live in a perfect world where nothing breaks. That can ruin probably a month or a year, if you didn't cater for that. But it's because you didn't think of that room of error,
And the problem is there that if that kind of stuff does happen and you haven't planned for it, and granted most of us haven't, but if you haven't planned for it, now most likely if you did have any sort of retirement savings or anything like that, you're now going to pull on those savings, and then compounding gets wiped out.
You've ruined that.
And you need that time in the market in order for that to sort of build.
To make sense, yeah. And I've touched about on this, but there's actually a point here. It says the biggest single point of failure with money is the sole reliance on a paycheck to fund short-term spending needs, with no savings to create a gap between what you think your expenses are and what they might be in the future. So we need to look at our needs, reassess our needs, look at them and reassess our needs,
That's very true.
Yeah, that was all from that.
Cool.
I'm done. So short was the chapters I wanted to discuss.
No, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then looking back at that Confessions chapter, so that's that last chapter of the book, or I suppose the second last chapter. He has a little end chapter there. So Confessions, the Psychology of My Own Money is the subtitle, and that's obviously Morgan's money. So he says, or in general, Morgan likes the idea of freedom, as we've spoken about, and put differently, he likes to use the word independence. So early in the book, he says that money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. So you read a fairly similar thing a little bit a moment ago. And so to him, this idea of independence is very important. And he defines independence like this. Independence to me doesn't mean you'll stop working. It means you only do the work you like with the people that you like at the times you want for as long as you want. So it's very similar to that freedom thing that you read. And then it carries on. Independence at any income level is driven by your savings rate. And past a certain level of income, savings rate is driven by your ability to keep your lifestyle expectations from running away. So that's tying a bunch of these different things together. And of course, keeping that stuff in check can be extremely difficult because we always feel like we deserve more, we deserve to treat ourselves more. If we're lucky to earn enough, it's difficult to humble ourselves and be like, we maybe don't need more. That's not to say we shouldn't ever buy nice things for ourselves every now and again, but most of the time, it's like with eating sweets. I struggle with this certainly, but you get
Confession time.
this is my confession part. Um, you have one sweet and you just keep on eating more and eating more, and there's no real benefit to it, but it's just somehow our desires like just don't stop, and they just keep on. We want more. We buy one thing, we go on to the next thing, and we just struggle to stop. But yeah. But then carrying on, so related to that, he later says that if there's a part of our household, and our in this case is Morgan and his family, if there's a part of our household finance plan that I'm proud of, it's that we got the goalposts of lifestyle desires to stop moving at a young age. Another great point, and something that we've repeatedly touched on, but I think it's important. And then something else which I found helpful was his financial advice summary. So he says there, if I had to summarize my own views on investing, it's this. Every investor should pick a strategy that has the highest odds of successfully meeting their particular goals. And I think that for most investors, dollar cost averaging into a low cost index fund will provide the highest odds of long-term success. And I think in part the reason why he's saying that is because dollar cost averaging is basically just saying normally on a monthly basis, because that's when people normally get their paychecks, then go and buy the stocks then and keep on buying each month a consistent amount and just do that over a very long period of time. That's dollar cost averaging, because you're not dumping all your money at one point where that might be the low of the market, but it also might be the high of the market. So if you buy over a long period of time, then you're sort of averaging the cost over time. And I think it's also that important to reiterate what he said there about picking a strategy that has the highest odds of meeting your particular goals, because we all have ideas of what is important to us. And take an example, travel for me is not important at all. I'm very happy to do things with friends and family around the city that I am. If I get the chance to travel, that's great, but it's not something I'm sort of desperately desiring. And there's some people where that is an important thing for them, and it's and it is an important thing for them, and it's not wrong that that's an important thing, and it's not even necessarily an expense that they should not or should forfeit or something, because it can be something that's valuable. And so for that person, their financial goals are very different to mine, because putting money aside for travel is an important thing to them, because it gives valuable life experiences in various ways, and very good points to be made there. And then for me, it's different. And for someone else, it's different.
I feel attacked.
Yeah. Travel is, I think maybe it's just too expensive for me. That's why I avoid it.
Again, like, you don't have to do the expensive. The worst to see the world without spending an arm and a leg. Yeah, again, it's about living within your means. If you want to travel, and make it within your reach, instead of going to Europe, travel Africa or travel South Africa, But people here travel and like, I want to go to Bali, I want to go to Dubai, I want to go to Maldives. Like, no, again, different.
No, just France. No, I'm joking.
We're different. So you can experience different things, see different parts of the world without having to spend. That's just my opinion. I might be defending it because that's
because you feel attacked.
That's what I enjoy. But
no, I think
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, because you're right. I think a lot of people do look at sort of it needs to be going overseas, but there's a lot of places that we don't see in our own country and things like that. But that's also just another way of trying to figure out ways of saying, okay, I don't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you can go overseas. It's not like a massive thing. If people want to go overseas and they have the financial means, sure.
Sure.
But don't put yourself in debt to go
To
overseas,
go overseas,
and
yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Funny enough, I was actually last night talking to a friend. We've all had the misfortune of having our phones grow legs, at untimely points. And I've dreaded for years to get a contract. And at the beginning of this year, that thought crossed my mind. I was just like, I need a new phone and I need it now,
Yeah.
And I want to say unfortunately, but maybe in hindsight now, so fortunately, my contract application was rejected. And like thinking about it, like if I was getting a phone on contract, I was gonna get a phone that I can't afford, cash, And it's like, again, I would have been in debt. Everyone would be like, "Oh, you have a really nice phone," but you're actually like X amount in debt because you're actually still paying for it. So yeah, I quickly reeled myself back in. It took a few months of patience, but looking back, like I don't regret that it went that way because unfortunately buying cash makes the perfect financial sense, but other people would disagree because that's money I would have saved and
It can earn interest and stuff. And I think that's the thing, right? It goes back to what are your goals? What do you want? For you, it clearly makes you feel more financially sound to not have that contract. And for someone else, having the contract might be a thing that's really helpful because it helps them to have a certain amount of money allocated to data and airtime that they can use, and then they don't spend more than that. Otherwise, maybe when they have prepaid, maybe they do spend more. And that might work for them. But I think the important thing is when you looking at something like contracts or buying cash, if you can afford to buy cash and it makes you feel financially at ease, then that's a good decision to do. If you're looking at getting a contract, then probably my only piece of advice is don't trick yourself into thinking that when you getting a contract now, you can all of a sudden get a super fancy phone, because at the end of the day, you're still paying for the phone. And so I think that's maybe where people sort of the whole rational versus irrational thing, and they don't quite make the sort of rational decision, which in some cases is fine, and in this case, so it's not the end of the world, but it's money that you're spending that you don't need to spend. And again, if you have the money to spend on it and it's something you really want, then that's okay. But be aware of all of those kind of little ways that we spend money. Just to touch on a last thing on that chapter, which I think was also very insightful and helpful, is he says that, so this is another quote, he says, "One of my deeply held investing beliefs is that there's little correlation between investment effort and investment results. The reason is because the world is driven by tails. A few variables account for the majority of the returns. So no matter how hard you try at investing, you won't do well if you miss the 2 or 3 things that move the needle in your strategy." He goes on to say, "My investing strategy doesn't rely on picking the right sector or timing the recession. It relies on a high savings rate, patience, and optimism that the global economy will create value over the next several decades." And that somewhat ties back to the previous book that we read, The Effortless by Greg McKeown, because the effortless way here is taking the simple investment strategy and being consistent over the long term. Because we often think we need to be these, again, going back to the genius investor versus the person who has their behaviors under control. if we just consistently do that investing thing and we choose something like a broad index fund that has that diversified risk and stuff, then yeah, we don't have to do anything super fancy. We just have to be consistent. So I think that's quite, especially coming from someone like him, it's quite a wild idea to say there isn't really a correlation between that effort that you put in and the reward. Yeah. At least for most people.
Yeah.
Like maybe the top sort of 2% of investors, there is a difference, but yeah, the average person,
Not really.
no. Cool.
Cool.
Do you want to give some concluding thoughts? Any ideas to wrap up?
Funny enough, I've just been hit with something now that, in summary, if you actually think about it, it's all about, and I'm saying this loosely, in every aspect of life, it's actually compounding. Because if you go back to Atomic Habits,
yeah, exactly.
It was about, you don't have, if I would use losing weight for instance, you don't have to lose it all in one day. You have to tweak your lifestyle, do certain, eat right, exercise often, and all that, and that compounds to you losing the weight and have a healthier lifestyle. Same with money, you don't have to all put it in one place at once. You slowly put away money, and over time, that will compound, and it'll be lots of money 50 years from now. Again, with effortless, like you find what works and stick to it, and following set routines. So yeah, that's my thought. And also, like, I think another thing is know your goal and know what game you're playing.
Know what game you play.
Because just looking at, James is doing crypto now, and you don't know how he's managing his crypto. You can't just say, also, I'm also going to, you can do it, but your strategies are different. So yeah, and also don't listen what's out there. Do pay attention, but don't check at the first thing coming in. Like, you understand what's happening before you decide to sell your stocks or something. Like, understand the trends. Be aware. Don't be in your bubble. Is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, in conclusion, from my side, if you can and you have extra money at the end of the month, put it away. That's all I can say. That freedom is important. Waking up to be, I'll go back to my traveling, because that's what I love. Waking up and be like, I want to go to Cape Town and have breakfast there. Why not? If you can afford it and doesn't break the bank or put you in debt, why not? If that's what you'll have to do, do it.
It's about those, what are your financial goals?
Yeah, just have that in place and know what it looks like. And I know I'm bringing back another chapter, but one that I forgot or thought we should add is, what was it? It was about the costs.
Everything has a cost.
Yeah, nothing's free. Know what it would take for you to have that lifestyle. Like, that end goal is like, I'm putting my goalposts there because that's how I want my life to look like.
Yeah.
So it's about making those sacrifices. It's all about sacrifices as well. Make that sacrifice that I can't take out today because I want to travel next week. Yeah, and I think that's what most young people lack. It's this instant gratification. Live now and live now in the moment. Me.
Yeah.
But
and it's difficult to get away from that. I mean, yeah, I don't think any of us are sort of perfect examples of
Yeah.
escaping that.
Yeah. But yeah, those were my concluding thoughts.
Nice.
Mm.
Yeah, from my side, so being good with money, I think, is more about psychology than understanding the economy or what makes for a great investment. And it's about how you behave in relation to money. So that's some of those points that he made earlier. And then he goes on to say in the book that that savings can be created by spending less, and you can spend less if you desire less, and you will desire less if you care less about what others think about you. And as I often argue in the book, so this is still him speaking, as I often argue in the book, money relies more on psychology than finance. And yeah, I think it's a very good point. And drawing from those ideas and from just the general stuff that we've spoken about to psychological virtues, what I'd call is humility and patience. So if you, I mean, okay, for the humility thing, he says less ego, more wealth. It's kind of as simple as that. Obviously, there's a lot of things that one can discuss and sort of tease out there. But overall, if you have that humility, if you have less ego, then you generally will end up with more wealth. And then on the patience side, he says here, if you want to do better as an investor, the single most powerful thing that you can do is to increase your time horizon. So it goes back to that compounding thing. And what you were saying earlier is a lot of things tie back to compounding. I mean, we're talking about finance, we're talking about health, we could talk about knowledge, all of those things, compounding. But it's important to realize as well that it's not just compounding, it's compounding with patience or consistency, however you want to phrase it. Because if you let it compound for a week or two and then you stop, it's not going to help. But yeah, I think underlying that compounding is almost the assumption that you need that consistency. So tying all these pieces together, we should have humility, as that will cause us to show off less, and then we'll realize that we often don't need the things that we think that we do, and we often don't even really want the things that we think we do, and that will in turn allow us to save more. And related to that is realizing that, of course, enough is enough, and stopping the shifting of those goalposts. And then the room for error idea, because life is full of unexpected risks that you don't want to let wipe you out. But the good part of that is that resilience amidst that risk, combined with the patience, allows for compounding to do its magic, because you need decades in the market for that compounding to really pay off. And sticking through those recessions and waiting for those tail events to land in your favor. So just like Buffett, where he stuck through those recessions, and there was some crazy numbers like, I can't remember which chapter it was in, but where at the time, Buffett was worth $84 billion, and 80 billion of those dollars was in the last very short while, because compounding is wild, and just in general related to all kinds of fields. I mean, we touched on them as well, but also coming to mind now is just the idea of progress in technology and things. And Ray Kurzweil, I mean, a lot of people sort of think he goes a bit extreme with his futuristic predictions and things, and I don't really delve into that world, but I know that his almost whole premise is built on the idea of we don't quite realize how powerful compounding is. Our brains just aren't able to sort of compute. And then, so consistency and getting through those tail events so that the odds land in your favor. And then also, amazingly, because those tail events are hard to predict, there's that idea of there's little correlation between effort and results in investing. Because remember, those tail events, because they're hard to predict, it kind of ends up being pointless to spend the whole day trying to decipher the financial world and all of that. But instead, the author's general advice, dollar cost averaging, or in South Africans' case, rand cost averaging into something like a broad index fund. And then very lastly, pro tip, don't just spend your money on unnecessary things. Rather use your money to gain control over your time. Yeah.
Cool.
So, great book. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, James.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. We'll chat again.